Addiction is doing something that you know isn't good for you and you're doing it anyway. Teaching people how to break those emotional addictions is the side effect of that is called joy. A person is no longer tormenting. I don't want the magic to end. Like there's too many good things going on in my life. Like I want to keep doing this. It's working for me. So it's kind of not like I have to. It's a want to. Oh, there's a definite connection between your brain and heart. It's natural for the heart to tell the brain to get creative. It's time to imagine. It's time to fall in love with a future. The only way you're going to free yourself from that person or from that past experience is for you to literally overcome the emotion. So, God, we've all had people do really horrible things, and we've probably done some horrible things to people as well. But I don't think you can free yourself or free them unless you decide that love is going to be the thing that heals it. And God, so many people do it in our work. And the side effect of it is that they have wonderful effects in their lives, many times just healing. Yeah, well, God, I mean, what a crazy time to be alive right now. And there's so many things happening in such a short amount of time. I mean, it's almost overwhelming. Every day there's something happening. And, so living in stress is living in survival. The problem with the stress hormones is that the arousal that's created from the stress hormones causes us to move into these higher brainwave states called beta brainwave states. We're aroused, and the arousal causes us to pay attention primarily to all the things in our outer world. The arousal causes us to put our attention on our body. It causes us to obsess and think about time. And so people get stuck in these high brainwave states. And I think the big challenge is if you understand that stress is when you're knocked out of homeostasis, when your brain and body are knocked out of balance, then your response or your reaction to people or circumstances in your life that you're chronically feeling on a regular basis is actually weakening the organism. Because when you turn on that emergency system, the fight or flight nervous system, because of the hormones of stress, and you move your body out of balance and it has no time to recover and turn back to balance, now you're headed for disease. Because no organism can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. The arousal creates a rush of energy and people become addicted to the stress hormones. They become addicted to those emotions. And so that now they need the people and the conditions and the circumstances in their life to reaffirm their addiction to the emotion. They need the bad job. They need the bad relationship. They need the traffic. They need the news just so that they can stay in that emotional state. So then 75 to 90% of every person that walks into a healthcare facility in the Western world walks in because of emotional or psychological stress. That's the number one thing. So our emotional response to the conditions in our life then becomes the important element. So people think, oh my God, when I'm emotional, I can't control my emotions. And turns out you can regulate. Turns out you can shorten the response period from emotions, and it takes practice, right? So you could have the most ketogenic, vegan, organic, peptide, whatever, intermittent fasting diet, and you could do yoga, and you can do cardio, and you can do HIIT training and foundation training, whatever, get massage, acupuncture. But if you're an emotional wreck and you can't, if there's three types of stress, physical, chemical, and emotional, then there's three types of balance, physical, chemical, and emotional. If you got your body in physical balance and chemical balance and you're not putting it in emotional balance, these will never stay. So then the important element then is teaching people how to shorten the refractory period of their emotional responses and catch themselves when they're feeling those emotions and change it and not rely on anything outside of them to do it, a video game or a drug or whatever people do. Teach them that they have the tools to do it themselves. And if they understand that they're addicted to those emotions, I've seen this thousands of times. There's always an aha moment, like, I'm addicted to anger? Really? Oh my God, maybe I am. Now, the moment you recognize that, oh my God, I'm using that person to reaffirm my addiction to anger. Oh my God, like, I don't want to feel anger. Okay, well, an addiction is something that you think you can't stop. Addiction is doing something that you know isn't good for you and you're doing it anyway. So if these emotions are addictive, then I'm going to probably go through withdrawals, probably overdosed a few times. I've probably had a couple bad trips. Okay, so let me get really clear, like, how am I going to change this? So if the change is to be greater than your body, your environment, and time, when you live in stress and you live in survival, all your attention is on your body, your environment, and time. It means that when we're living in stress, it's really hard to change because it's not a time to change. It's time to run, fight, and hide. So teaching people how to break those emotional emotional addictions is the side effect of that is called joy. A person is no longer tormenting their body and keeping it out of balance. And many people who heal in this work, they don't say, oh, I'm gonna heal this health condition. They'll say, the first thing I'm gonna do, and this is the majority of them, is I'm gonna work on getting my body back into homeostasis. Like I'm gonna work on regulating my emotional states. I'm not gonna react in this way. I'm not gonna respond this way. That's the work right there. It's breaking those emotional addictions so that we can move out of survival. And in survival, it's not a time to create. In survival, it's not a time to meditate. It's not a time to close your eyes and go within. You'd be eaten. It's not a time to be vulnerable. It's not a time to open your heart. And yet we got to work with our bodies and be able to recondition them to a new mind. And so a lot of the work that we do, especially during this time in history where everybody's feeling the pressure, the environmental pressure of stress, is to give people the tools to be able to self-regulate. And when I mean self-regulate, that means move from one emotional state to another emotional state. And it's not bad that we react. We all react. I react. But the question is, how long? How long are you going to react for? Because if you keep doing it for months or years, it ultimately becomes your personality. We did a study where we had people stop feeling survival emotions for 3 days and have them practice feeling elevated emotions, heart-centered emotions. We measured a chemical called IgA, immunoglobulin A. It's your body's natural flu shot. It's actually better than a flu shot. And so we measured people's IgA levels at the beginning of this time, and then we measured them at the end. At the end of 3 days, by trading those limited emotions for more elevated emotions, their IgA levels went up 50%. 50%. So that when you're feeling an elevated emotion, the body's so objective that it's believing it's living in a nurturing and loving environment. If the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, that person is signaling genes ahead of the environment. And now the body's going to make globulins, which are proteins that are going to create more internal defense and less tension on external defense. So the immune system then, which is the internal protection system, begins to move back into order. I try to avoid that word because I think it conjures up a lot of beliefs for people. I think I'd like to say, if you can set aside a certain amount of time for yourself, just for yourself, to be alone with yourself. And for me, my routine is to have 2 hours in the morning. That's just my time. That's my time where I'm going to get my brain and body right. It's the time where I'm going to think about the things I have to do in the day and how I'm going to be in my day, get that all clear, and then I do my meditation. And my meditation is really for me to overcome myself and change and then create. And I don't care if you do it in the morning or in the evening. I'm a morning person. I've always been a morning person. I have friends that are artists and musicians, even my kids, they're just more evening people. They just are creative, so they like the evening. It doesn't matter to me. I just pick a time in your day where you can, who you want to be and who you no longer want to be, and think about what you're going to change, and always make a little room for the unknown, which is the fun part, and get creative. Yeah. And so that's one of the things I'm proud of in our community. I'm really proud of the fact that people do the work. Like, everybody does the work. It's not like I have to make them do it. And when I ask them, why do you do it every day? Aside from the majority of saying that makes me feel better, they typically say, I don't want the magic to end. Like, there's too many good things going on in my life. Like, I want to keep doing this. It's working for me. So it's kind of not like I have to. It's a want to. Oh, there's a definite connection between your brain and heart. So we were so fascinated. This was February of 2020. I'll never forget it. We started when we were doing our electroencephalograms, our brain studies. We put a cardiac lead from the heart to the machine, and we started looking at HRV in comparison to brainwaves. And coherence is rhythm, right? So when waves are kind of moving in rhythm like this, you can see that on the brain scan, right? They're very orderly. They're they're rhythmic like that. So if you think of waves that are coherent being very orderly and being very rhythmic, when they're out of order, like choppy, and they're on different parts of the brain or on different rhythms, that's when the brain's incoherent. And so when we started looking at training people how to broaden their awareness to sense space, when you're sensing space, the act of sensing and feeling causes you to stop analyzing and thinking. And if you're not analyzing and thinking, you start suppressing neocortical activity. Your brainwaves start to slow down. In beta, you're aware that you're a body local in space and time. That's low-level beta. Like we're talking right now, we're in low-level beta. If I said, Stephen, I'm going to give you a quiz, and you're going to have to take the quiz in front of your audience, and you would kind of perk up a little bit. Your brain would get a little bit more aroused, and the light bulb would get a little brighter, and you'd move into mid-range beta. That's like when you're going to give a speech, or you're at a dinner and you don't know people, you kind of be a little bit more aware. So beta is conscious awareness. Now, in beta, the brain is trying to create meaning between what's going on in the outer world and what's going on in the inner world, and it's processing all the sensory information. So a lot of data. So beta is like conscious and awake. And so there's low-level beta, there's mid-range beta. It's not on this chart. But high-level beta is when you're fearful, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're in pain, when you're frustrated, when you're jealous, whatever. People get switched on in these high levels of beta, and that's when we get over-focused. You ever been under stress? You start over-focusing. That's because you're narrowing your focus and you're over-focusing, and that's kind of a brain state. And so when you broaden your awareness and you, instead of narrow your focus on something physical or material, that's what the stress hormones do. But if you broaden your awareness and you sense space, and you this act of sensing causes you to no longer analyze and think, and your brainwaves start to move into alpha. Now, in alpha, which is this brainwave, is a slower brainwave state. That's the creative state of the brain. The brain sees more in pictures, more in images. It's more imaginary, right? In beta, there's a voice talking to you in the back of your head all the time saying, this is right and this is wrong. You got this to do, you got that to do. That's the critic kind of in our brain. When you get beyond beta brainwaves and you move into alpha, you start opening the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Now, we're not just looking for any type of alpha, but we're looking for coherent alpha. So we want all those compartments that were firing in different rhythms and different frequencies, all of a sudden start doing this. So now the whole entire brain starts moving into what's called global coherence. Now, when the brain starts synchronizing like that, what syncs in the brain starts to link in the brain, and the whole brain starts to fire as one neurological network, and that's what our data shows. Now, that's not the end. That's just when you're moving into an imaginary state, and people do this, but a lot of people move into alpha, but it's not coherent. So we're looking for coherent alpha. Now, many of the people that are meditating really well, they can relax their body so well, and they can feel so safe that their body moves into a light rest or a light sleep while they're still awake. So it's relaxed and awake. In that realm, you're in a hypnotic state. You're in theta brainwaves. And in theta now, lights are shut out in the thinking neocortex that plugs us into three-dimensional reality. The identity's gone. The character is gone. There's no activity there. Now the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open to information, and now we're suggestible to information. And now we're in the operating system. We can get in the subconscious mind and rewrite a program. We could rehearse a new script. We can tell a new story. Instead of the story of the past, we can tell the story of our future, and we can program our subconscious mind and our autonomic nervous system to begin to change our biology. Now, go too far past theta and you fall into delta, and now lights are out. You're in a catatonic state and you're unconscious. And so we kind of do this when we go to bed at night. We go from beta to alpha, theta to delta. And if you're under stress and you're in high beta, you can't sleep. And you can't sleep because you're thinking, right? And you can't drop through brainwaves. When you wake up in the morning, you go from delta to theta to alpha to beta, right? So there's two times that the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind opens up. But what does this have to do with brain and heart coherence? Well, in theta, when a person is in that state where their attention is on their heart and energy is in their heart, it's natural for the heart to tell the brain to get creative. It's time to imagine. It's time to fall in love with a future. Now the heart is the creative center. It's the part of our biology that allows the brain to begin, the frontal lobe to begin to create. So you get the heart and the brain kind of working together. The more relaxed you get in your heart, the more awake you get in the brain, something beautiful happens in the brain. If the person can sustain this and they're in that theta state, theta becomes the carrier wave. And right within the brain, you start to see alpha waves building on theta waves, and then alpha waves in harmonics into beta waves, and harmonics into high beta, and then high beta ultimately into gamma. And now the person is relaxed and very awake because gamma is super consciousness. It is super awareness. So the formula of being relaxed and awake and synchronizing your heart to your brain causes the brain to move into a state of what's called resonance. And resonance is when you have waves on top of waves, harmonics, and the brain starts functioning in a more resonant state. Sometimes even people have delta as the base, carrying theta, and theta carrying alpha, and alpha carrying beta, to high beta to gamma, and they're all waves within waves. And as those waves come together, if they're coherent, they interfere and create a bigger wave. And then those waves come together and they interfere and they create bigger waves, and that's exactly how the energy in the brain goes up. So we have brain scans of people whose gamma brain waves are 200, 300, 400 standard deviations outside of normal. And I'm gonna give you an idea. 3 standard deviations outside of normal is 2% of the population. So they're processing an enormous amount of energy in their brain, and it feels really good, really good. So we practice a lot synchronizing the heart to the brain. Comparative study actually this year with psychedelics and meditation. I can answer that question more definitively. What we do know from fMRI studies with psilocybin is that the default mode network in the brain, the one I was talking about earlier that's always the brain's predictor, that shuts off with psilocybin. And that's exactly what we see in our advanced meditators on our fMRIs, that those people that are having a mystical experience right in the MRI looks like they're taking psilocybin. The same exact brain circuits are turned off. Well, I'll answer it in 3 ways. First way is when you're conscious in your subconscious mind and you're trained to imagine whatever it is that you want, you're going to begin to signal your autonomic nervous system to start manufacturing chemicals equal to your intention. In other words, the intention of whatever you're thinking about acts as information that begins to change your biology. So theta is a great way to open up the door. We also use theta when we want to program people, because it's a hypnotic state, to a mystical experience. And if they're in that state, remember, when you're suggestible, you accept, believe, and surrender to information as if it's the truth without analyzing it. And that's what programs people's biology, right? So you can program somebody into believing they need a drug, and you can program somebody into believing just about anything, but you could also program them for a mystical experience, and that's what we do. Now, so we can do that by giving them information when they're in that hypnotic state. They're very suggestible, but we're only going to do it in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. And then the third way is something that we really discovered that we weren't expecting.